Hey guys, thank you for tuning in to another episode of InRange. This is our June 2017 Q&A.
Yep.
We are doing it inside a house because the life support systems outside are insufficient to sustain us long enough to be able to get through these questions without actually dying on screen.
Yeah.
There may even be noise in the background because the air conditioner is running, and without that running, this house also becomes unsustainable. So we'll have to apologize for that in advance, but it is what it is.
About half of the state becomes unsustainable about this time of year.
I am not exaggerating. If the air conditioning turns off, literally it was shut off, and I'm like, Ian, what's going on? It's dying in here. It takes like a minute, and it starts heating up. So we're talking about 110 outside right now.
In fact, this is one of those places like up in the Great Frozen North. It's a legitimate thing. If it's winter and you run out of heating oil, you might die.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the old, the weak, the sick, the very young literally die. Same thing here.
People do die when air conditioning goes out. When there's power outages, people that are infirm or elderly do die from that.
Yeah.
It's a true thing. So calling it life support's not crazy. One thing I also want to add to this is we're at the point now, and this is fantastic, in regard to our Patreon support, that we have enough Patreon supporters that when I asked for questions 2 days ago, we had 225 submitted.
That's a substantial number.
That means that if we were to honestly answer all of them, this would become the InRange Q&A channel, which is not possible. So we apologize for the ones that we were not able to get to. We picked the ones that we thought we could answer well today.
5 pages of them.
And what I could say is, as we solicit for questions, keep submitting them and eventually we'll get to yours.
Yep.
That's the best I can say. So last time I read them, you get to this time.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we will start with Samuel, who says, with the Army looking for a 7.62 by 51 caliber service rifle, would that affect a change in your What Would Stoner Do project?
I don't think so.
I was going to say the easy answer to that is no.
I don't think so because while I think that there's a role and a need for a larger caliber in your squad, for example, I could see that. Mm-hmm. First of all, I wouldn't go with 308, I'll tell you that right now. And on top of that, we're not trying to build that rifle. We're trying to build an intermediate cartridge-based quote-unquote battle assault rifle.
A carbine.
A carbine, exactly. You like how I use the word battle assault rifle? That'll make everyone nuts because there's battle rifles and assault rifles, but we're trying to make a combative's gun.
And some would also say there are neither battle rifles nor assault rifles.
Right, there's always somebody to say something.
Yes.
But no, it would not change that, not in my opinion. And again, if I were to do something, it wouldn't be with 308.
Yep.
So.
Next up from James for What Would Stoner Do? This is a popular project.
Well, it is a popular project. I'm really surprised by how popular it is, although I'm glad.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad that people like that we're coming at that from a different angle.
We should say there were a lot of questions that involved what are all the parts in the Stoner rifle? And that's the thing. At this point, this isn't a rifle where we just knew everything in advance. A lot of these parts are things we're trying out, and some work and some don't. And so we don't want to go talking about what parts are in the gun until we know that we're actually going to stick with specific parts.
I've been kidding about that, but we're certifying the parts as we go. And no, but I'm serious. I hope that the audience should appreciate this because we're not putting out anything that we don't already have faith in because we've tested it thoroughly.
Yep.
So there's components that we tried and went, nope, no good. We found components that were better. For example, we decided not to go with one optic over another, that kind of stuff. And so until you hear from us, this is the conclusive answer. It's not the conclusive answer, and we're not going to reveal it till it is.
It doesn't have the official InRange stamp of hubris.
I don't know about that, but we are truly trying to make sure we're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So
anyway, for that reason, all of those questions did not meet.
We just can't do that yet. Exactly.
Anyway, James says, for the Stoner rifle, you seem to be neglecting 62 grain improvements, such as soft points, LEO rounds, or Mark 318/SOST. Are you still reevaluating the ammo choice? Keep up the good work.
You know what? I will full on admit that this is not a world that I'm really well versed in.
Okay.
So let me put this way. What you're seeing when I talk about Mark 262 and the 75 and 77 grain bullets, the reason I bring that to the table is because I have personal experience with it.
A lot of high power.
I use it in high power, and I've used it for hunting too.
Okay.
And I've seen it to do very nasty things on meat targets. It's not a good barrier penetrator, but I understand that. And so I'm coming at that from a perspective that I have based on my own personal experience. However, by going with the barrel twist rates we are, 1 and 8, it doesn't really matter. These ammo improvements, you could standardize on different ammunition unless they go wildly off the reservation and choose something very strange like 90 grain bullets or 100 grain bullets.
But we know they won't do that because that would require changing all of the military barrels, which they're not going to.
So I would say, well, I have a personal preference based on experience on 75s and 77s. The gun's designed in a way with the right twist rate that you could change that and not affect what we're doing.
Right.
So I'm sorry I don't have a better answer on the ammo, but it's not something I'm that deep on, quite honestly.
Primary, we should take a look at it.
We need to spend time on it.
We'll put it on the calendar. I'm thinking summer of 2019.
2019, and by then they'll be doing something else, yeah.
All right, Pascal says, if AR-15 suddenly disappeared, what would you get instead?
Why don't you answer that one first?
AK-74.
Wow, you said the same thing I was going to say. If the AR-15 suddenly blooped off the planet and did not exist anymore, I would immediately, without hesitation, do exactly what you did. I would go towards a modernized AK-74.
Yeah.
Boom, done, simple, no reason not to.
Yep. There are some other alternatives people are going to come up with. I think people are going to ask about like the AR-18/180.
Yep.
Honestly, just given the balance of everything, I think I'd rather have a 74 than an AR-180 or clone thereof.
We have a lot of backlog in the video queue which is good because there's a lot to put out to you guys, but we're trying to pace things out. And we're also not trying to drown any particular part of the audience with one thing. Yeah. If we put all What Would Stoner Do or AR-15 related videos up for the next 2 months.
Say hypothetically, we did a month of Bergmans.
Hypothetically, we did a month of Bergmans. There's going to be a group of people that are like, I don't care about Bergmans, right? So we were trying to be very broad in scope and culturally relevant. And so we do have lots of What Would Stoner Do stuff coming. And one of the videos I have is me running through a training course with a modernized 74 and our What Would Stoner Do rifle.
Right.
And I'll go ahead and give this away. I always beat my times my AK-74 times were slightly, that much slower in every instance, except one, than they were with the What Would Stoner Do gun. So the AR-15 always beat it by a little bit.
Yeah,
however,
not by much though.
The difference is so close that if that roof rifle disappeared, I would just immediately pick up the 74 and be like, and move on.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you can kind of do all the same sorts of things with the 74 as you can with the ARs. You can make very light, handy, small profile barrel carbine versions, and you can tack them out with the entire Zenitco catalog and 12 pounds of accessories.
That's the one thing that's about that. So people have asked, what would Kalashnikov do? And we could have that conversation, although it wouldn't be Kalashnikov. It would be what
Kalashnikov would do the 47.
Yeah.
Apparently he wasn't even too thrilled with the 74.
Right, fair enough. But I mean, you can get a 74 to be functionally field equivalent in every way with all the force multiplying stuff on it. You can with a What Would Stoner Do rifle.
Yep.
But it comes at a huge weight penalty.
Right.
And that's the problem.
Yeah. All right. Kevin says, if you guys were going to design a bullpup for use, as you discussed briefly in the Stoner versus Tavor videos, for example, like an SMG with rifle capabilities, what caliber would you chamber it in, assuming that resupply isn't an issue, and why? You go first. 5.56, 5.45. I don't know a good reason to deviate from that. I guess what you always get into is a trade-off of bullet weight versus recoil impulse. And as long as you have effective terminal ballistics, I don't know that there's a whole lot of good reason to try and bump the cartridge up. Where this all ultimately comes down to, from a military perspective, is how far away are you actually fighting? Mm-hmm. And we have 75 years or more of historical data that says virtually everything is 300 yards and in. And a lot of it, the ones where you can actually make hits, are 50 to 100 yards. So that would be my focus. Is this cartridge going to be effective at 50 to 100 yards? And stretch to 3.
Of course, we're hearing that being contested in Afghanistan, where people saying things are going way out. And those guys are PKMs dumping at 800 meters or things like that.
Sure.
But yes. Yeah. It's interesting, when I saw this question, I threw it in here because I don't mean to be snarky to Kevin's question, but if I were going to design a bullpup, my first question is, who's forcing me to do this and why, and how is it that I'm not fighting them? Frankly, I mean, I said this on one of we're collaborating a little bit with PNS here and there, and I made a statement on there. I'm like, you don't sit down to design a good rifle and then suddenly come up with a bullpup.
Not anymore.
You just don't. You sit down and say, I'm going to make a bullpup. And you're doing that in spite of all of the other empirical data that proves that it's really not better in any way except overall length.
Right.
You're flying against all of those things to do that.
One of the funny things, if you look at them historically, is pretty much everybody who adopts a bullpup does so with the intent of, like Kevin said here, consolidating rifle and submachine gun into one weapon. Mm-hmm. But then virtually everybody goes and makes a short version of the bullpup, which then gets distributed to everyone who would have had a submachine gun.
That's true.
Even all the way back to the EM2, they made a short paratrooper version. The L85, they have a little dinky carbine version. The French did not. The French just have the one.
Yeah, they just have the FAMAS. Yeah.
But the AUG, they're little short, even 9mm AUGs. what are the Tavors, micro Tavors, mini Tavors.
Absolutely true.
They're short Tavors. It always backfires. No one ever manages, except I guess the French, to design a bullpup in order to consolidate and then actually consolidate.
And I know this infuriates people when we keep saying it, and people are like, why are you like this? Why are you so mean to the bullpup? It's not about mean. It's about the reality is that I've never seen an instance in which the bullpup brought anything to the table, whether it's at a match or a training event, in which it did something better. I've seen getting in and out of a car better.
As a carbine. The Walther 2000?
That's different.
Yeah, right? But that's one of those areas where, if we're going to look at the entire bullpup concept, there are some specialized areas where it can make more sense. And as a precision rifle, where your barrel length actually kind of does matter, and especially as a police rifle, where having some compactness does actually kind of matter.
Yes.
And where, as a precision rifle, you're not doing all of these super fast speed handling tasks. You're not trying to speed load a Walther 2000.
No.
Then the negatives of the bullpup don't really matter as much. The positives are a little more useful. Okay, it kind of makes some sense, but that's quite a bit different from standard infantry.
I'm glad you corrected that statement, because we have seen that instance. And but this question specifically is about in it as a SMG, or he's implying a carbine.
Yes.
Okay. So, but I do, and I will continue to say this, I think there is a niche application of bullpups. A sniper or precision rifle very well may be that niche, or something bigger even. But the something that's going to be pretty long and unwieldy anyway, but it's not some sort of CQB-based gun, you're right, maybe the SVU would be an example.
Sure.
Never had a chance to use one.
I've never even seen one in real life.
And then on the other far end of the spectrum, while it's a tiny little ice pick of a round, the P90 is, because it's a kind of bullpup config and it's SMG, that thing is handy as hell.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think there's places where on the really, really small end and on maybe on the bigger end, there are places where it might apply. But when it comes to the rifle, just a standard rifle or carbine, that's where it kind of falls apart.
Right. Yeah. Which is also weirdly where it's been done most.
It is, yeah.
All right, we're going to move on to some questions about two-gun action challenge match and matches in general.
Yeah, I kind of push these questions together into categories so that if you're not interested in one particular category, you can jump to the next one. Yeah.
So first off is from Yemam.
He actually told us how to pronounce this properly, and I forgot, and I apologize. So.
And you didn't tell me.
No, so I let you do it this time.
So, would you guys ever consider doing a series or a match focused on revolvers? I have seen you run some shotguns and older bolt-action rifles in matches before, and even do videos on some of the less modern designs, but I've yet to see anything similar in regards to revolvers. Personally, I'd be very interested in seeing a revolver video in a similar format to the pistol grip-only shotgun, comparing revolvers to semi-autos or something of that sort.
I think it's a good idea.
Sure.
And I think we haven't done that. I mean, we've occasionally run a revolver with the two-gun match, way back when you came to the conclusion, the right one by the way, that the Nagant revolver is not worth the weight that it's made out of. No, I seriously tie a string to that and swing it around until you hit somebody in the head with it. It's one of the worst guns of all time. But I think I shot a Schofield once in a single action army.
I did a little bit with a Webley.
But it's been you did. Yeah. But it's been very minimal.
Yeah, and it's been a long time.
It has. I think that running a match or two with revolvers would be very worthwhile.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
In fact, even take it to something that's not even two gun. Make it to a steel running gun.
Yeah.
Like take the Schofield or your Webley or whatever. Yeah. And I think that would be very interesting, and that would also be good on the head cam.
Yeah.
But I also think that doing a pistol grip pump type thing where we compare a semi-auto to a revolver would have merit.
Sure.
For example, when the Walther CCP recall came about, and I put out a video saying, "All right, this is what this is," and my backup gun is a Smith & Wesson Performance Center 327.
I think it's a beast of a gun.
It is, but the thing,
8-shot 357 with a scandium or titanium.
Made out of unobtainium, and it's super lightweight. And when you fire it, it's like the hammer of God coming down on your head and whatever you're shooting it at. However, it does have a purpose, and it's not a purpose for fighting ISIS. It's a personal defense revolver that conceals well with a bird's head grip and has 8 rounds in it, which is better than a standard revolver. It's a beast, but it has a specific niche application if you're only trying to defend yourself.
Right.
And revolvers also apply in certain ways in grappling situations or close combatives that sometimes semi-autos do not. And we've not addressed that, and we've not talked about that.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of confusion about it. They're like, what the hell would you be using that for? And it really is a thought-through reason, and I came to that conclusion at the South NARC ShivWorks ECQC class, in which I saw a number of semi-automatics in very close quarters malfunction constantly. we were spending more time trying to clear the gun than we were trying to shoot the guy that was killing us with a knife. Not always, but sometimes.
Okay.
And guess what? The wheel guns don't do that. Not to the same way. The kinds of malfunctions you can have with a wheel gun are very different.
Right.
And so...
Not that they don't exist, but they're different.
And highly unlikely.
It's weird. It's almost like we keep coming back to this idea that everything's a trade-off.
But it is. And so I'm not saying, you know what, take your semi-auto and throw it away. I'm not saying that at all. In fact, my preference is a semi-auto.
Right.
However, the wheel gun is not entirely useless. And I think doing a series of matches or videos with that would have merit.
I agree.
So I agree.
We will put that on the schedule.
Yes.
That will be spring of 2020.
We have a lot to do. Yeah.
Next up from Mark, have you considered incorporating malfunctions into 2G ACM? Having snap caps loaded into people's magazines so they have to cycle their actions or potentially transition to their pistol depending on the stage? No.
Wrong. Yes.
Yeah.
Previous to your time.
That's right, you did.
We have done it. I think I told you the story. It wasn't when you were shooting with us yet. We haven't just thought about it, we did it. And it was such a catastrophe, quite honestly. First of all, trying to do that blind or run someone without knowing when the malfunction is going to occur. So if you're to put a snap cap in there, so then you have to do it at a random time, and they need to not know which magazine it's going to be.
Yep.
And then you got to make sure that they somehow encounter that snap cap somewhere during the course of fire. So if they've got two 30-round magazines, or three of them, I put up 3 fingers, which one has a snap cap in it? And we got to randomly load them to make sure that it happens at somewhere in the course of fire, because if it doesn't happen to one guy and then happens to another, then they missed out and then the stage is different. We're not worried about fair, but what we're trying to do is get everyone to have a similar experience.
What's the point if not everyone actually?
The other thing we did is we tried to induce some significant malfunctions like causing bolt overrides and things like that, which we were successful. But here's something that you overestimate. If you know how to clear that stuff, good to go. If you don't have that skill set, you're not just not good to go, you're absolutely screwed. You are behind the 8 ball in a way that is unbelievable. And it became such a disaster trying to clear these guns, people inducing malfunctions that they couldn't clear, and then we had to cease fire, and then one of us that knew how to deal with it had to clear the gun. So it's a training event thing to do, and you should do it, but it does not work on the clock in a public event.
And I imagine that you were doing that when you had substantially less attendance at the match.
Yeah, we only had like 30 people at the time. This is a long time
we
ago.
got more than twice that many people often now, and more other cartridges, different calibers people are using it. It's not feasible.
You bring up another point. It's not all AR-15s, and it's not all 5.56. And trying to induce malfunctions in an environment that has a myriad of different cartridges for example, let me say.
Screw you! You're not making a bolt override in my 74.
No, but you can induce other problems.
Sure.
Or let's say, for example, you make them chamber a fired cartridge case. That's a spent cartridge.
Okay.
And then this happened. Someone chambered a 5.45 in a 5.56, so not a loaded round, just a spent cartridge case. That became a beat it out with a rod and a hammer environment situation. So again, let me repeat myself, I guess. It's a cool idea, I get it. It works in a training environment that's controlled and disciplined for it. It doesn't work in a public event that's a match. It just doesn't.
Yeah. Christopher says, I have enjoyed watching the matches you and Ian have competed in while wearing outfits and using gear and various weapons of various time periods and conflicts. It gives an interesting insight into the practicality and effectiveness of the various setups and weapons. My question is, have you or Ian considered competing using prohibition or gangster era weapons and gear? With one of you using a law enforcement setup and the other utilizing what was available to gangsters or mafia of the time period.
I think it's cool. I think it'd be fun. By the way, there's a shooting match out there called the Suit Shooters, I think they're called.
Advertised. I don't know if they even still exist.
Well, they used to. Yeah. And they did exactly this. They shot essentially cowboy action matches with period stuff, most of them gangster.
Yep.
And it'd be really cool and it'd be fun. The cop thing would be like some kind of .38 revolver.
So here's the thing. The gear is the same. The guns are the same for both sides.
They are.
They really are. Colt 1903s.
Unless you're going to have a cut-down BAR or
38,
like that.
But the cops had BARs too.
Yeah, but I'm thinking of like the cut-down ones.
That's a little different. Yeah. BAR, Thompson, and then a couple of the guns, those are hard to get and use. But Remington Model 8s,
A5 shotgun.
A5 shotguns, pump shotguns, but the semi-auto rifles could be Model 8s and Winchester self-loaders.
Yep.
Both sides had them, both sides used them. There are some extended magazines, although that's also really cost prohibitive and difficult to find and get working as well. Yeah, I think it'd be a lot of fun. I think the problem with Zoot Suit Shooters was it was really focused on the Thompson.
It was.
And the only people who were able to compete were people with Thompson submachine guns.
Well, or semi-autos, and by the way, I'm going to tell you this right now. The semi-auto Thompsons are cancer. Don't even bother.
Yeah.
First of all, boy, it's going to make people mad. A real Thompson kind of sucks.
Yes, it does.
A semi-auto Thompson is beyond
Really,
suck.
really
It's just garbage.
Yeah, a semi-auto Thompson with an 16-inch barrel. Is just no.
It doesn't even make sense. It doesn't even look right. So if we had our hands on a legit Thompson with a proper cuts compensator and a drum for that, that'd be epic.
Yes, it would.
It'd be cool. But we could do it with a semi-auto rifle and a proper pistol, a 1911, or maybe the cop has a wheel gun.
Sure.
I think it's a good idea. I think we should pursue it, and I think it'd be a fun themed 2-gun match.
Yeah.
It'd be even better if we could get our hands on a real Thompson, but
we'll have to see what we can do.
Maybe that's not unobtainium. It's not I like it. I think it's a good idea, and it's something we haven't touched upon.
Yeah. All right, so I will go buy a 1911, and you buy a Thompson.
Oh, sure. I'll just pick one up tomorrow. Yeah.
We're kidding.
No, but maybe someone would loan us one. You know, they'd have to, because it's an NFA item, they'd have to be there.
Exactly.
So that they'd have to come to the match, and they'd have to be willing to let us run around with their transferable, or maybe
$30,000 Thompson.
Well, you know, if it was a non-transferable, like an SOT kind of thing,
dealer sample thing would work.
then maybe they wouldn't care if we're getting it dirty and scratched up.
But again, the key there is whoever owns it has to actually attend the match. Which sounds, I know that sounds like, that's awesome, it'd be lots of fun. It's more like we need to find someone who is a machine gun dealer and has one and would loan it to us and doesn't happen to have anything they need to do then.
Yeah, exactly, because they're going to be there from 8 till 2 in the afternoon. So.
Anyway,
but it's a good idea.
A lot of fun.
It is cool.
All right, David says, have you ever shot a 2-gun with a 22 long rifle? And if it can't knock over a plate, how would you score that? Not sure why, but it was a random thought after watching one of your 2-gun videos. That's kind of the problem is, There is a minimum caliber standard for the match, and 22 does not qualify because, for one thing, it cannot knock down steel plates. 5.7 sometimes has issues.
5.7 frequently cannot, although at one time we did have a rimfire division and we were trying to let people do it. And it just didn't work. It was like they bring out 22s, the stuff wouldn't fall off, the plates wouldn't fall off, and then we'd say, okay, if you hit the plate 3 times, we'll consider it neutralized, but then it's a spinner target, it doesn't spin. Which one of the spinner plates did he not? We just got to this point where, like, this rimfire thing doesn't work. Sorry. Yeah. We threw it out, and we replaced it with manual, which is a much better division. And so we tried it, yes, doesn't work, unfortunately. Yeah.
Thomas says, where can I find listings of shooting events like Hard as Hell and 2-gun action challenge match, and how far in advance are dates usually set?
I put this one in here because the answer to this is, my God, I don't know either. I wish there was some sort of collective calendar of such a thing.
It'd be awesome.
That's a great idea.
I wish there were actually more matches than just the 2 that he listed.
Someone should do that.
Yes.
I would say, obviously, our channel, we have our thumb very deeply on the 2-gun thing.
Yep.
And so we're not going to know about or be able to tell you about all of them because inevitably there's a 2-gun match in Somewheresville that we don't know about.
Right. These are all local matches because there is no real national organization doing this.
And that's a good thing.
Yes.
However, being outlaw means that there's no collective calendar. And so since we are kind of the 2-gun prophets, there are others, but we're prophets of it. I would say that watch our channel and we will let you know. Yeah. Hard as Hell, for example, is one. 2GACME here in Tucson, the AZ 2-gun up in Phoenix. Now that's all Arizona and Utah, but we'll do our best. But I think the idea of having a collective calendar would have merit, and I wish I could tell you, but the reality is there isn't such a thing.
Yeah.
Word of mouth. And there's no better answer right now.
Yeah, we'll see what we can come up with.
Yeah.
All right, gun laws and education.
That was what I called it,
Starting with Arnie. If possible, can you guys give a non-U.S. viewer a general overview of U.S. gun laws? Sometimes I watch your stuff and think, how the blank can they actually do this legally, regards from Norway?
So, I put this one in here because, I wonder, and I might be wrong too, is it Arna? Because it's Norwegian?
I don't know. You're the Norwegian.
I know, but Arna? I apologize. One of us got it right.
I'm not even. You want to pronounce his last name right? Because I'm not.
Yeah, that's what Vidsbergsgård. Vidsbergsgård? I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm sure I mangled it. Anyways, I threw this in here because this is a question that comes up a lot, and we have a European audience, and the answer is you'd be surprised how complex that problem is.
Yes.
Just like Europe, while there is, for example, the European Union, and there's an attempt to standardize some things across most of Europe, and obviously Norway is not part of that, so I'm not saying it is, but just like there's a federal government here that has its base laws that apply across all 50 states, but then each of the 50 states have a very unique approach to the problem too.
The state laws can vary as much or even more than European national laws from country to country.
So, for example, one state away, literally, you cross a river, a car full of stuff, completely legal here in Arizona. You cross a river, you are a 17-time felon.
Right.
By crossing one river, and I'm saying by driving into California. California is one of the most stringent, if not the most stringent state in the entire union at this point, and Arizona is one of the most liberal, in the right sense of the word of liberal, in terms of gun laws. And so you can kind of, for example, if you legally possess a fully automatic submachine gun here in Arizona, not saying you should, but there's nothing illegal about concealed carrying that into a restaurant to eat.
Right.
You could have that under a jacket, a submachine gun, legally. Are you saying I'm saying you should do that? No. Maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't. That's up to you. No legal issue with that whatsoever. That same gun in California, holy mackerel.
Yeah. So I think what we can do is give a brief overview of machine gun law, which is, as it's controlled by the federal government, there are two classes of machine guns. There are transferable machine guns and there are dealer sample machine guns. And this is a generalization. So all the US guys who are like, well, I know there's more than that, but transferable means they can be owned by anybody in the country. We'll get to that in a moment. Dealer sample means they can only be owned by people who actually have a license to work in the trade as a machine gun dealer. So the cutoff there was a cutoff in the 60s and a cutoff in the 80s. Most of the old guns tend to be transferable. Anything made after 1986 is only going to be a dealer sample gun. If it is transferable and you decide to buy it, basically you go through a background check and a de facto waiting period, which is right now 8 to 10 months.
Oh, if not a year.
Yeah. And it's a substantial FBI background check, and when you pass, you get the gun, you can own it, you can go shoot it, whatever.
And that background check only applies to that one item. If you buy another one that's also NFA, you go through that same year wait again.
Right. NFA is National Firearms Act, which is the law that set up most of this system.
Which came about in 1934.
Yeah. So we do not have a license to own machine guns. There's a license to be a dealer of machine guns, but just to own a machine gun, there's a tax and a transfer background check. Once you own it, that's it. It's yours forever until you decide to sell it. Now, people will ask, well, if I'm a dealer and I buy a dealer sample gun, how do I then go about selling it to the public? The answer is you can't. Initially, the idea behind that is these dealers are the ones who are supplying machine guns to military, police, security organizations. They need to actually have sample guns in order to be able to market them, sell them, let police departments try them out, that sort of thing.
And they usually have a letter from local law enforcement as well.
Yeah, sometimes that's necessary,
not always.
Sometimes not. That gets into a little bit of a complexity area. But what those things also get used for is rental ranges. So you can have a license to be a machine gun dealer and also run a shooting range where you rent machine guns to other people to come in and shoot. The legal requirement is that as the owner, you must be present, or someone who is on the license must be present with the gun at all times. So when we talked about a few minutes ago finding a dealer with a Thompson gun, even though it's a dealer sample gun, anybody can shoot it as long as the legal licensed guy is there
within reasonable control. It's something, I forget what the terminology is, essentially within control. The idea is he can suddenly grab it should he need to.
Right. Yeah. He can't loan it to someone if he's not there, but he can bring it to the match, give it to Karl and I, and we can run through the match.
As long as he's present.
Exactly. So that is the machine gun legal situation.
Well, that's the NFA situation. NFA includes machine guns, suppressors. I mean, it's a whole list of things. So, but that's by the way, if you live in a state that's NFA friendly.
Right. There are some states that simply don't allow machine guns. Period. Even though you might be able to legally get one under federal law, the state says, not in this state, you can't.
But let's go ahead and so that's one answer, and I don't know that he's even talking about specifically machine guns. Let's talk about the more.
Okay.
Let's do two other examples of Class 2 firearms, right?
Okay.
I think that's the right terminology. The normal stuff, the not NFA stuff. So let's just use Arizona and California as the examples of the polemic opposites.
Okay.
So for example, here in Arizona, if I legally possessed, let's say, a Luger.
Okay.
And you're like, that's the coolest Luger I've ever seen. I want to buy that Luger from you. I'll give you 3 times market value for it, Karl. And Ian is also an Arizona resident, and I know Ian to be an acceptable person who's not what's called a prohibited possessor. And I know Ian, so I know he is not. And I also know that he is an Arizona citizen, and he lives in Arizona as his primary place of residence. I can sell that to him right now, at least as of 2017, and hopefully for the future. He can give me money, and I can give him the gun and walk away.
Yep.
Completely cool. We can do it in the parking lot of the local supermarket. Completely legal.
Not that I've ever done that sort of thing before.
But that's completely legal in Arizona because that's a private party transfer between two Arizona citizens, both of which neither of which are prohibited possessors, and therefore it's a legal transaction to a legal possessor in a legal way. If I wanted to do that same thing in California, you could not legally do that.
Right.
You have to go through an FFL that's local. So let's say Ian goes, I want to buy that.
FFL is a federal firearms licensee. That is someone who is a registered dealer of firearms.
So in California, the exact opposite in terms of how they control stuff compared to Arizona, we would go to the local gun store probably, and Ian would say, I'm buying this Luger from Karl. They would take possession of the Luger.
Yep.
They would run a 4473 background check, which is a federal background check on you.
Yep.
They would hold the gun for whatever the waiting period is in California. I don't know what it is. I think it's 10 days or something like that. But it's some waiting period. Once the waiting period had transpired, and then you passed the background check, you could then come back into that same gun store and then take possession of the firearm, provided that the firearm was on the California authorized firearms list.
Right.
That's another thing that we don't have, which is, I'm just giving polemic opposites. They have a list of acceptable guns that are safe, and the guns after a certain age don't matter. But modern guns, for example, if I was selling you a modern gun that was just made, it has to be on the California acceptable list.
Right.
And if it isn't, then you can't do that again. That's another example. So that's just one example, but that's in the United States alone, one state apart, that's how extreme the differences are.
Yeah.
So another example, if I want to let you borrow my gun, take it.
You're in Arizona.
Have at it, man. Now in other states, not. I don't know which state's which, and I can't name them all. We know our own state's laws because we live here. But a lot of the states in the Southwest are pretty open with this stuff.
Yeah.
Arizona's pretty good. Utah's pretty good. New Mexico on paper isn't, but in practice isn't bad. Texas is actually pretty bad.
Not as good as people
ever think Texas is great, and it's not that great.
Yeah.
Well, California's horrendous. New York is horrendous. Florida's pretty good. I mean, it's
a checkerboard.
It's a checkerboard, yeah. And when you're crossing state lines, you have to be cognizant of that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
so
that's where
there's another example.
Tricky.
There's another polemic example. Arizona is constitutional carry. If you are not illegally prohibited from possessing the gun, you can legally carry it.
Concealed or unconcealed.
You could have it in your car. You could have it in your pants, under your shirt, concealed or unconcealed, open carry or concealed.
Whatever, we don't care.
As long as the place you're at allows you to carry it. You can't bring it into places that you're prohibited. Like they have a legal sign saying you can't go into a post office, you can't go into a courthouse, stuff like that. But if you're at the local Fry's Food and Drug and they're not posted in Arizona, you don't need a permit. Right. You can get a permit, but you don't need it. California, not even. The gun needs to be secured in the trunk, unloaded in a lockbox with the ammunition and magazine separate.
Yeah.
And if it's not if it's not like that, that's potential jail time.
Yep.
Again, one river apart.
Yeah.
So I know that that's complex, but being that you're in Norway, just wanted to make it very clear how different and how diverse the laws here are based state to state.
And there's so much more that we didn't even touch on.
Oh, you could do an entire lifetime of explaining the idiosyncrasies of all this stuff.
Yeah.
So the point is people think that, wow, everything there looks really it's really free with the guns. And compared to some places in the world it is. But I think that actually, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think firearms laws at the federal level, are they not equal or thicker than the tax law?
Oh, God, I don't know.
I think tax law and firearms laws in the United States are right next to each other in terms of complexity and density. It's not, when people think guns here are not very regulated, they are very regulated. We have a lot of laws.
Yes.
Yeah, so it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things I've run across is in Europe, often once you go through the hurdles to be able to have guns, oftentimes it's easier to get machine guns in particular than it is here in the U.S.
I have no knowledge of that.
There are places where, some places are better than you would expect. Anyway.
And you can answer that to a degree, and that's not the question, but in Europe, this idea that the United States is the only place where people own guns is not true.
That is correct.
And you've definitely been to many places around the world where people have a lot of guns.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Now, they may be in the privileged few.
They usually are.
Unlike here, where you don't have to be in that.
Right.
And by the way, we're not arguing you should have to be like that. I mean, I think everyone that's a decent person should be able to own a firearm, so don't read into these statements. But in Europe, it is possible, in some places at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Matisse says, what has been or would be the most effective way to educate the general civilian population in how to safely handle firearms? Oh, geez. Beatings.
Beatings? You know, I have an answer to this, and the funny thing about this is it goes against my general nature in other ways. For right or for wrong, and I don't want to talk about this specifically, we do have a public education system.
This is true.
This public education system does good things and bad things. Anything that is large of that nature and government controlled can be used as a tool for good or for bad.
Mm-hmm.
So let's
usually both simultaneously.
Usually both. Well, let's not go there. The reality is that it is the one place, at least in the United States, where you have a chance to educate most of the populace on something or some things. Sex education, which is controversial, is one of them, which is a life skill. Yep. Let's be honest. And I think in the United States, which is awash with guns.
It is, and it will always be. That's never changing.
You could ban every gun
of laws.
You could ban every gun. You could make every gun law there ever was. There are so many guns in the United States. Good luck.
Yeah.
You ain't getting rid of them. And so it is the reality that the chance of running into a gun in your life in the United States is high. Mm-hmm. Whether it's being pointed at you or not is a different problem. Finding one, running into one, someone having one in their house, is the likelihood is nearly 100%. So if that's the case, and we have a public school system, I would vouch for why do we not at least educate on the basic safety level on firearms.
Another place you could certainly go into this would be ranges, shooting ranges.
Yep.
If you are going to, and I think any range that's operating, any private or, well, frankly, private or public range, should have a competency test in order to use. Now, if I have a public range, I think it is irresponsible of me to set up a shooting range and not confirm that the people that are paying to come use it are not going to shoot themselves or someone else.
What about the public land in the desert then?
Well, that's different. There's no one out there to be checking anyway. But if you wanted to make sure that the people who own guns are competent in their handling, most of those people are going to use public ranges at some point. Yeah. We've seen this, even like the Ben Avery. If you show up there and they don't know you, before you can shoot, you have to sit down and watch a safety video. Is it the most effective thing? Maybe not, but I think it's not just for liability's sake, but I think it's a decent idea.
I'm going to go ahead and let that one just stand with your comments on it because I don't know what to say to it. That one hurts me. I'm not sure what to say about it. Okay? I'm not going to contradict you, but I'm like, that one just makes me cringe and I don't know what to do with it. So I'm just going to leave it there. But what I wanted to say about the public school system thing again is that I think that that's your one chance. And I think one of the problems we have is one of the big problems we have here in this country, I think, is we simultaneously glorify and demonize this item. Mm-hmm. Okay, the media makes the gun look very sexy and cool and fun, which, by the way, guns are cool and fun. I'm not going to argue they're not. They're fun as hell. They're also powerful weapons and tools. Mm-hmm. And then we simultaneously demonize them and make them a taboo subject that we shall not talk about. But if our culture is inherently going to have them around, and we're going to see them glorified in the media or in video games, which I'm not saying they shouldn't be, don't misinterpret this. The reality is, why do we then simultaneously demonize them? If we make them a normal part of life, at least not necessarily if you don't want one, you don't have to have one, but normal in that if you see one, you don't suddenly panic yourself and shit your bed, and you know that, okay, that's the trigger, here's how I unload it, here's how the magazine goes in. The very simple, basic things.
We take it for granted that kids ought to know how to deal with household chemical poisons under the...
Exactly. So
don't drink the bleach.
But by glorifying and demonizing simultaneously, you make a toxic brew in which people are ignorant, yet attracted.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it.
And so I would prefer that they have no problem being attracted to it. I have a collection, and I love shooting them and shoot matches. However, if we could squelch the ignorance part,
that'd be nice.
We'd be way ahead of the game, and I think that would be a big difference in my opinion.
Alrighty. Marlon says, why are so many shooters such bad shots?
Oh, this comes back to the same thing.
Yes, now that we're getting off of the potentially controversial questions.
Yeah.
Coming from a full-bore background, I'm consistently astonished by the lack of fundamental marksmanship principles many people online show. For trigger technique, flinching, no awareness of natural point of aim are all par for the course. Why don't people want to further their skills? And have you thought about some videos focusing purely on the basics of marksmanship? Take it and run.
Well, we could. I mean, you know what? This goes right to what we just said. This is, again, glamorization and glorification and demonization, making something exotic to want.
Yep.
So you get it, and then you don't.
But taboo to talk about.
But taboo to talk about, so you go hide in the desert or go to the range that may or may not have a competency requirement.
Boy, if I was the guy owning or operating,
I could see saying that from a liability perspective for sure. But for example,
some things have some issues of liability.
You know what?
Absolutely.
Let me throw a bomb at you on that one though.
Okay.
We do not have a competency requirement for the two-gun action challenge match.
You do not have a formal one. You absolutely have one. Because if someone showed up being unsafe, they are immediately DQ'd from the match.
Well, they could be DQ'd, but the problem is, the reality is we've had very little of that.
Right.
And most people, surprisingly, in an environment that's controlled in a way that's productive, rise to the challenge.
This is like saying that we go to a rally car competition and yet they don't have a driving test.
That's true. You know, let me be fair. The person that's willing and willing to put their ego on the line, or put their ego aside, I should say, and come to the two-gun match or any of those environments are probably already not the guy that you're seeing that has all the poor skills being demonstrated so well. And so what that guy is, quite honestly, is enamored with the item as a toy versus encouraged to use the item, being the firearm, as a tool for skill and personal development. And therefore, their desire to become competent with it doesn't exist. All they're doing is, I saw this cool thing in a movie or game and watch me blast stuff.
Yeah.
And therefore their skills become that, and they never increase beyond that, and their desire to increase beyond that in most instances is not there.
Right.
That's what I would say.
I think that covers it pretty well.
And that's a sad state of affairs.
Yes.
I would rather they become, I want them to be gun owners, I just want them to be competent gun owners.
Yeah.
That's all. Competent and safe, that's a good thing. And it would be nice to encourage that more versus blow stuff up. And blow stuff up's cool, I get it. But the Dirt Shooter Nationals, it would be better to see a more productive use of these tools.
Yes.
Yeah.